Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. We're your hosts, Debbie
and Juliana.
On today's episode, we are delighted to introduce our special guest, Alex Ostroy, the visionary, co-creator, and artistic mind behind Ostroy, a dynamic cycling brand built with fellow cyclist and business partner Aaron Vecchio. The essence of the Ostroy brand is all about self-expression, stemming from a genuine fusion of art and cycling that Alex combines to create a symphony of colors that intertwine to form a kaleidoscope rich with vitality and compose a melody of vivid, abstract, and insightful hues. His designs ignite conversations, evoke emotions, and inspire pure joy. Wearing a piece of Ostroy's line feels like a personal ride into his boundless creative universe. Through risks taken and obstacles faced, Ostroy unveils what fuels his inspiration and brings balance to his world. We are thrilled to have you on today, Alex. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome, Alex.
We're really happy to have you here today. So fill us in more. Let's start with your background and how you got started into cycling. And I know you're an illustrator as well. I want to know more about your artistic background.
Well, I grew up cycling and drawing and painting always. But by the time I think I was 15 or 16, it was pretty clear which one had a chance of paying the bills. Might not have been the way that, I would have chosen it, but I had friends that were already making it onto the national team and who would go on to race in the Tour de France and stuff. And it didn't seem to be my destiny. I moved to New York City actually after high school to pursue a career mostly as a painter. And I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I knew that that's where Basquiat and Haring was from. I knew that's where punk rock and rap was being invented or was invented. And that energy and excitement and the aesthetic, the kind of very eccentric DIY, very American kind of aesthetic attracted me. So I moved in. I got a job as a messenger, and I slept on someone's couch, and that's sort of how I started.
Were you a bike messenger?
I was a walking messenger. I actually didn't even bring my bike. I didn't realize there was even I in my mind I was like, well, no one can ride a bike in New York City. That's absurd.
How funny.
It's super insightful too at that age to make that big move.
That was kind of the reason I did it at the time. I think I just needed a kick in the ass. I knew if I grew up in Los Angeles, if I stayed there, just not much was going to happen for me. So I had a friend that moved here and he said, it's so difficult to just get up in the morning, brush your teeth, comb your hair and get to the subway that everything else is easy. And I was like, that makes that's totally absurd, but it made sense to me for some reason.
Yeah, it clicked.
It was true. It worked for me.
And that's how you find your groove too. So how did you get into painting on your own? Were you just following your heart?
I was not to kill the romance of the story a little bit, but after about a year and a half, I was doing okay. I actually got into a gallery, but I didn't know anyone my age. I was working with a lot of adults. It was pretty tough. So I visited a friend who was going to Brown at the time and next to Rhode Island School of Design. And I sort of went and I begged them to take me. They said, we can't take anyone halfway through the semester, but you can, if you submit an application, maybe you can start next year. So I did that. And then came back and majored in painting.
Did you feel like that honed in on all your skills? Did you learn so much more through that? Sometimes school helps. Sometimes it can get in the way.
I think it probably did a little bit of both. I think you learn a lot from the people that you meet who are still some of my closest friends. It'd be hard to imagine my life without that. But I think there's a trade-off. But I think, it's my experience. So it's hard to imagine my life.
You seem to have a very successful career in arts. And then it looks like, I think it was 2013 that you made the switch more into the cycling world, working even, I believe, with Grand Fondo, New York. How did that happen?
So what happened was when I came to New York, even after college, I had no plans to be a cyclist. And I became an illustrator and was lucky enough to start picking up work with Rolling Stone and Wired. And in those days, you could make a living as a magazine illustrator, and you could pick up all kinds of illustration jobs. So that career sort of panned out for me. And in the 90s, if you could do illustration, because of the computers coming to the fore, it was the crossover between illustration and graphic design was. So I started to pick up all kinds of different work, mostly because people didn't understand exactly what I did. So they said, "Could you design my website?" And I was like, "It's not really what I do." And then sometimes if it's not intriguing, I was like, "Sure, I'll design it." But it's funny. I taught also at Pratt and Parsons and SVA. And I think the best class, somebody had me teach a class for graphic design. I said, "I'm not a graphic designer." And they said, "That's why we want you, because it's for non-major."
Love it.
Very smart. Because I wasn't really, I don't consider myself like a pure graphic designer. And they said, "Well, these are kids from painting and filmmaking and other departments. So you can help explain it to them, to people who aren't, or sell it to them, really, the importance of it." That helped me. And I definitely got a lot better at it going through that, because it is a different skill, which I would not have realized as much when I was at RISD. I just thought, well, that any good painter could be a good graphic designer. I think a little bit dismissively, but that's not necessarily true.
No, I don't believe that either.
Yeah.
I think there's certain things that we're meant to do. So Grand Fondo, New York, that was one of those key projects that kind of kicked certain things off.
Exactly. So what happened was my career was going well, picked up cycling as a way to commute, and I started going on the weekends. I was like, I'll just go to Central Park, and I had just a 3-speed bike just to do a couple laps. Before I knew it, I was riding with groups of people in the back with my 3-speed bike, and then maybe I should pick up a road bike.
Oh, yeah.
It's a slippery slope. And before you knew it, I was racing again. So I got immersed in that community. And then on the teams that I was on, because I was involved as a designer, they'd say, "Okay, your job is going to be design our jersey and, work on our website and design stuff." So I started doing that. I didn't think of switching careers or doing this. I had no desire to go into the cycling industry at all. Aaron, who became my partner, I started a development team, and he was on my development team, and he called me years later, kind of out of the blue. And he said, he was a bond trader. And he said, "I'm going to quit my job and start a cycling jersey company."
Yeah, it does sound a little crazy when you hear it like that.
Exactly. I didn't know him that well at the time. I said, "Why would you do that? You're out of your mind." I'm not going to do that. That's crazy. It's like starting a restaurant or a rock band or, becoming an actor. If that's not your all-consuming passion, why would you do that? The odds seem so slim. So that was the talk that we had. I had already, now at this point, for fun, I had done some jerseys for teams, and they had picked up a little bit of a following on Instagram, and a local bike shop started carrying some of them. It still didn't really make me think I wanted to quit it was just a fun hobby.
Yeah. It's cool to see your art and people wearing it too.
It was like my two passions kind of coming together. I just never thought it could be a living in saycling. He called me again the next week.
Wow. Oh my gosh. This is something.
We had the same conversation. He called me again the next week.
Holy,
he was in a mission. He was in a mission.
it was. And I think somebody was trying to tell you something too.
I guess so. And he said, look, I'm gonna do this, with or without you. I'm just gonna do it. And I had by then some connections in cycling besides the design background. And I was like, well, if you really want, it's crazy, but what the hell, we can try it for a few months. And if it doesn't work, no big deal. Honestly, I was worried about him and I felt bad for him, which of course is ironic now because as it turns out, he was an amazing partner. And even though I've become sort of the face of the brand, it owes probably more of the success to him than to me, to tell you the truth. And now when I'm walking down the streets in New York, sometimes I'll wonder how many great architects and chefs and all kinds of people that just haven't met the right partner, are just never going to sort of realize what they could or wanted to do.
100%. I feel that way about Jules, my co-host.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Because we had these ideas and I think on our own, we both kind of felt like, I don't know if I can do this. But when you find the right person to do something with and there's passion behind it and there's obviously skill, it makes for a beautiful partnership. I think you both had such strengths that maybe you didn't even completely realize, but there was no mistaking why he chose you and kept hounding you. I mean, that's just obvious talent that was standing out and that you're brilliant at what you do. So I'm sure that felt good for him to come to you to ask that because he could go to somebody else. So coming to you.
Yeah, honestly, I think I was the only one that he knew that was doing that.
Stop. Yeah, well, you can't say that now. Art can look completely different on a different sized canvas and platform.
Yeah.
So an idea in your mind or a painting, when you're wearing it in a shirt or a jersey, everything's smaller scale, how it's going to come across, the whole piece of it. How do you make all of that magic kind of work?
It's just trial and error, I think. I think there are a lot of good designers that have never designed a jersey or a shirt. And I can see the same things that I did wrong, especially because it's really, the shape of the human body is not flat and people design it on a piece of paper or a desktop. And then, for example, if you put a logo on the sleeve, it comes out to look much bigger than you think when you're laying it out on a pattern. There are many things like that. So it's, you get it back when you first start and you're like, oh, I didn't mean to. That looks terrible.
So some patterns that you see with some people, not even just in cycling, but in fashion in general, you're like, didn't they check that? You see and it's on someone's boobs or bum, looking funny. And you're like, no.
Yeah, actually, this is like a probably not surprising point of contention between my business partner and me. And I don't blame him. So often, if you look carefully, a lot of the designs are, I will change them iteration to iteration. I'll get it back and I'll say, no, I really wanted to, I mean, honestly, I would keep doing it on all of them, probably every time. Some of them have gone through 5 or 6 iterations. And sometimes that's been very helpful because they've really started off in a place that I just didn't get it right. And then sometimes I go on a few rides with somebody wearing it and then it hits me. That's really helpful. Kind of out of the blue, not at my desk. And then I'm like, oh, that's what I should have done with that design. Mm-hmm.
It's so true. It's inspiration is being out there looking at things. Like just now that I'm looking at Jules' shirt, all the colors that are coming out, my eye keeps moving to the different colors in the movement. And that just excites your mind.
The funny story, that's been one of our more popular shirts. And so another big piece of our company is this relationship we forged with this small family-owned company factory in Tuscany.
Is that where everything's made?
Yeah, everything is made in Tuscany. And actually, it's Ferragosto now, the Italian holiday, where they take August off. And the owner of the factory and his wife are actually visiting us in New York now. We've become so close, which I think is sort of just the way they do business. We came there the first time and we were instantly, we had to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them, and it definitely is a different kind of culture. It wasn't just like an American business dinner.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be friends or we're not going to do business. And
Yeah,
luckily,
absolutely. Yeah.
and it turned out to be a great fit for us, this factory, because it's not an enormous factory. So they were flexible enough to kind of try out some of our crazy ideas and continue to.
I love that.
Yeah, I guess also I'm just thinking now that we're talking about this, the patterns working lively on a bike ride, but then you also probably have to talk to the factory, to this Italian family on the fabric and the cuts and all that and how it's going to work.
Sure. We do a lot of work on that. Obviously, we get more attention for the surface design, but we do spend a lot of time on that too. And to finish my story about that shirt is we wanted them years ago to get a new kind of printer that we thought would be a little bit more accurate and get some better detail. So they did it and they said, send us something to test it on. So I made a shirt out of a bunch of our other shirts and sent it to them. We got it back. I hung it up in our office just to sort of use to look at the colors. And everybody that walked by was like, oh, could I buy that? That's crazy. And so then it only took me 6 months to realize, if it's just sitting there, like, maybe we should actually make this. So I worked on it a little bit more, but that's basically how that one came about. Of course, the best ideas are just nothing you could consciously think of.
I know, completely.
Yeah, when I wear this shirt on the bike, I'm wearing the Ostroy, my favorite shirt, and just for the listeners, and I get so much attention. Everybody asks, oh my God, this is a cycling shirt? Where is it from? And then when people touch it and see how comfy and light and breathable it is, nobody can believe it.
That's another thing that I think was that we got lucky on, is that fabric. Well, not lucky, because we tried about 10 different fabrics to find that one. And we found one of the smaller fabric makers. We knew we wanted something that wasn't too stretchy and polyester like a jersey, really had a cotton-like feel, but breathed like a jersey. And it was sort of exactly what we were looking for, but it was difficult to find. And it's been great for us. Weirdly, the fact that it is a little bit more expensive has kind of helped us, because everybody that's copied that product thinks they're going to take a shortcut by using cheap polyester, but it just doesn't work.
Doesn't. I haven't seen anything like it. No.
Yeah.
It falls on the body just right. It feels so good and it looks amazing.
And I still need to order. I really want to try. So you guys are really pushing the boundaries. You guys now launched the what is it called? Mid-rise?
We've got crops, and then we released a shorter jersey, and then we have very high-waisted bibs.
Yeah, I love the look.
I just figured when I started riding as a kid, the jerseys were very long and going all the way back to when they first started. And they've just sort of gotten shorter and shorter. But I still think that if you do it right, you can still make them a little bit shorter. And everything that happens around the waist, the way that it sort of grabs in bunches, especially when you're in a cycling stance, it's not good. The bad things happen there.
I know.
It look good. So I just figured, just make it shorter.
Not everybody can wear race cut style jerseys, and they might love the pattern, but they can't fit into that.
That's a good point. With the modern fabrics, they really stretch a lot. And I've still yet to meet somebody that couldn't fit into our jersey. That said, some people don't want to look like that. Some people will get a bigger size, which is fine. We help them by pointing out some people want a smaller size. If you look at the guys in the Tour de France or at the front of a big gravel race, they're wearing a tiny jersey, and that's, for aerodynamics, and that's fine. And then there are other people who we're going to want a slightly looser jersey. So sizing for a cycling jersey is a little bit different, the way that you look at it than a shirt. But then that aside, I would say, to your point with the aesthetics, I guess we're sort of covering the range. We got the Minimo jersey, which is a little bit more flamboyant. And then the resort shirt, which can be worn a number of different ways, but certainly it's more casual and you don't have to put your body on display in the same way that you do with a regular cycling jersey.
So you did mention that you don't love to follow trends. You don't follow everything that you see some of these other companies following, where they're just releasing a subset of colors and it's very minimal and very safe. What is your approach as far as for designing and releasing a new line?
I mean, honestly, I think, of course, it's just more fun for me, and that's what I want to do. But that aside, I would still say, as a business strategy, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think what Simon Mottrit did with Rafa was brilliant. And he made cycling jerseys, he made them very minimal. He helped to make them more accessible for new riders. And he sold it as a lifestyle brand, which was brilliant. Everyone has sort of copied that now. But since that sort of hinge in this marketplace, now everyone just copies Rafa.
I feel like it stopped and everybody wanted that classic look and they represented that. Sometimes we want to wear something different. Some days we do want to be very classic and a low key, minimal color. But some days we just want to wear something more bright and expressive.
Right. So from a business standpoint, I think what I'm saying is, if we're going to zag when everybody else zigs, it's probably a good idea. We're not going to overtake Rafa in popularity. That's fine. We're not for everybody. However, there've got to be hundreds and hundreds of companies, very small companies, that are just offering basically, jerseys along that aesthetic. Why not do something different? Why not try some different ideas? I think for the smaller companies, they have nothing to lose.
I agree. And you're staying in a lane that you're good at too. Some companies will just try to do so many different things and offering too many different products. It confuses the mind. It's too much. And you want to be able to see a nice lineup of everything, and everything kind of flows together. It has an energy. What I love, literally from your logo, the way you lay out the whole website, it's a very simple formula and it works.
And I think the formula is there really isn't much of a formula. You can get around kind of making crazy stuff. And, we're in a bunch of stores like REI now, and they keep wanting us to tell us what the spring line, what the fall line is next year. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't even started thinking about it yet. We don't really plan things years in advance because we're always doing. That's the thing I think that differentiates us is most of these companies. Now, I was designing before I started this as one of my clients. I picked up some cycling companies and I would design jerseys for them and help them, consult with them on their jerseys and bibs a little bit before I started the company. And they were very scared to spend too much money on design. They thought of it as like icing, on the cake. It wasn't something, it was like, oh, we can't really afford it. And of course I kept thinking like, if somebody came in with design in a bigger way, I think the same way Simon Mottrit came in with marketing, he said, these people think they're marketing, but they're not really where he came from. Like, that's not marketing. Let me show you how to really do marketing. And he did. And it was like cycling caught its death of a cold, just a little bit of it went a long way. It worked really, really well because no one had really done it before. People had thought they were doing a lifestyle brand, but they hadn't. So in that way, we thought that was something that could be unique about us coming from design. Mm-hmm. We knew it wouldn't be for everybody. We knew a lot of people wouldn't like it. That's good. Too many of these companies, I feel like, would do better not worrying about that because they're just coming out with solid color Rafa-esque jerseys, no one's going to hate it. No one's going to love it, and then all of a sudden you're sort of, what are you competing on?
Right. You start to see something out there and you're like, oh, what is that you're wearing?
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff, you notice the construction sometimes, but other than that, if you don't set yourself apart in another way, you kind of blend into the landscape a bit too, especially if they're not representing their brand in a different light, like Ostroy does, where you'll see the New York City background. You'll see that it's artistic, eccentric.
Ostroy has an identity. It's a clear identity. If you see something out there, you can see it's Ostroy by the design.
We saw when we first looked at the space that, somebody commented, a lot of these brands, you could really take the product and the photos and switch them and no one would notice. We felt there was space to do something different there. I've had help there. I mean, in New York cycling, there are a lot of brilliant photographers. So we're lucky there.
And it's difficult to catch things like that motion and the art in the jerseys because they move a lot, like you said, with the design, with the body. You do have to have a good photographer who can catch everything.
It's a good point with us because I think with selling a red jersey, you just need a picture. It's more about the sunlight and the mountains and, the people, the vibe. You're not really showing the jersey. With our photos, to show them to people, you have to actually see the pattern on the jersey.
Exactly.
It's more limiting. So we have to think of sort of more creative ways of showing it.
Do you feel like it's coming to that now when you see your website, when you see the photographs? Do you feel like it's
not at all? Of course, I think it's all. I wish it was a lot better. We're always working to try to get it there. It's just, the ideas you have in your head, they never really come out exactly as well as you can imagine them. And of course, day to day, it's still running a clothing company, and all we see is the problems that the Italian suppliers to the factory are late with certain kinds of fabrics and, one thing after.
Ins and outs that we don't get to see on the outside.
Exactly. Now, I am very lucky that I do get to spend a lot of time just sort of drawing, which is the funnest, but also in other ways, even harder than the other stuff, because I'm just sitting there like, I don't know, what should I do? Next, I think I come up with a great idea. I'm like, this is terrible. And I just spent a week, That's like the most difficult part. But I realized early on that if I couldn't do that, I just wouldn't be happy. If I got a great job with great people that was fun and I wasn't able to pursue this all day, it gnaws at me. So, it's I made my bed, I guess.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, do you have any big influences in your creative side, any creative process when you're, designing a new line?
Right. I would say my biggest influence is really New York City. Again, why I moved here to begin with, all those different things, all those artists. I'll ride around. I take pictures of snippets of candy wrappers, book cover, people's,
I love it.
Weird old clothes. I go to vintage stores and take pictures of things there. I'm always, I probably do that 2 or 3 times a day and throw away 90.
But it's all part of the process, I guess, putting all those things together and recycling the ideas until you, something.
I love retro. I'm big into mid-century, and I see a lot of that coming through with the lines, with the way you illustrate.
Well, I think part of it that I always wanted to include is classic cycling. There's a great, rich history of design in cycling. This is sort of the core of our brand, is to fuse that with the modern aesthetics that aren't really, because I think in classic cycling design, it's very insular. They're not eccentric. They're not eclectic. They're not putting in unexpected outside influences. Like I said, originally, it's a very American, again, with things like rap and the East Village painting that was going on in the 80s, where people were doing a lot of collage and stuff like that, where anything is fair game and just throw it into the pot. So I wanted to, that's sort of a core part of our brand is bringing that very American way of making art into cycling.
I've seen some of your drawings lately inspired by the Latour. Are you bringing any of these to life in the collection, or those are just for us to admire and for fun?
Well, it's funny. One of the things I've learned is, the Mona Lisa or a Rothko is a great painting, but it doesn't mean it's a great jersey. Sure. A resort shirt, as you can see, has a very different aesthetic for us. Some things can work for both. There's no strict rules, but so I think sometimes there is obviously crossover. We have our Tour de France shirt, and some of those all of them were originally drawings that I just threw onto there. And that's true of a lot of the drawing in the resort shirts started as sketches that were just kind of scanned into the computer and then put on the shirt. So, but sometimes I have an idea for a drawing and I just make a drawing. And I don't think it necessarily would be a great jersey. Sometimes it's a cartoon or just a funny kind of like visual pun about cycling.
I love that. Or I have the little sticker.
Pretty okay.
I love that. Stuff like that.
Pretty okay about it. It's very good. Or the shirt you're using, I would, but I'm writing on that day.
It's sort of like, I guess ideas come to me once in a while. And then when they do, I'm like, well, is it a sticker? Is it a t-shirt? Usually it's pretty obvious what it is, but sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes other people tell me, they're like, no, that should be a vest. That would be great. And I'm like, you're right. That should be a vest.
Also, it depends who you have around you to give you those kind of ideas and bring that out.
On ideas, that's what I also like to tell. It's not feedback to kill. It's just to build on ideas.
100%. I happened to be following Tour de France and I saw the illustration come up that you had done of Gourmet. And I just thought I can look at art, but if something doesn't really make me think or have a conversation about it, like, who is this? Who did this? This is amazing. It's the classic aesthetic. It looked like classic cycling, what you'll see in these posters that you would have seen from old school Tour de France. And that's what really drew me to this. And then when somebody's like, oh, that's Alex Ostroy, I had the motivation right away to let you know how I felt and that I wanted to talk to you about this. I saw so much creativity. And
we love that. And when we found out this is like, okay, the artist is also the brand, we knew we wanted to have you on the show and talk about it. And, especially I have a couple, if not more, of the resort shirts. So it's super cool to have you here and talk to you and learn more about, your creative influences and what got you here. And it would be great to also know a little bit more of the future vision. Like we see a lot of smaller brands collaborating with shoe brands or bike brands. Does Ostroy has any vision of collaboration or what is the future looking like?
We've done a few of those with sunglasses brands, with Brash drink mix. We're doing something with Continental tires right now. We've done a lot too. Of course, with the resort shirts, a lot of people have reached out to us, groups, companies, corporations, and they say, we like this style, especially the ones with the drawings of places. They're like, can you do a bunch of drawings of our town where we're from and make it into a shirt? And, if it seems like a fun project and that sort of aligns with our goals and stuff like that, and we'll do those. I'm sure all companies, even smaller companies like ours, we get a lot of offers and asks every day that we have to sort of sift through.
Any funny stories to share on those asks?
Well, and there are a lot of offers to take free clothes. Along those lines, like obviously if, Peter Sagan writes us and says, hey guys, I want to wear your stuff from now on to every speaking engagement I go to. And just give me free clothes. Of course, that would be an absurd deal on his side. We would do that. I'm saying aside from our brand, I guess, just like the as a business, that makes sense.
True.
For us, right? Yeah. And then we also have, as part of what we try to do from the start, is getting jerseys and bibs and other supplies to our programs that I've been involved with before the company. I challenged myself Ride Upgrades, Kids Ride Club, charities in New York that help get kids in underserved neighborhoods on bikes. Everything in between, though, is like we want to do one or the other.
Yeah, there's so much thought that goes behind building your brand and how you want it represented and how it's going to work with other collaborations as well. It's so much thought. I wanted to mention about your giving back with the kids and the programs. Have you ever thought about having them help you design something or see what they come up with as far as having them draw and see what inspires them and see if you can release something like that for charity to build off of?
Well, so we had an award for Ride Upgrades where we gave a different kid a bike and jerseys and paid for travel and race fees every year. And one of the kids, for example, wants to start a clothing line. He's not a kid anymore. He's 23 years old now. I've tried to help him, introduce him to some people to manufacture. So the kids that are interested both in cycling and design, I try to encourage them and give them venues and ideas for pursuing them.
Yeah, I like that you do that in a mentoring role in that way. It's funny because when I put on my shirt, I have two boys, 6 and 9. And one of them's very artistic. I actually want him to go into art. He can just draw all day long and he has great perception. But they wanted to try it on. I mean, it looked like a dress, but they said, "Mommy, can you please ask Ostroy if he'll make some for kids?"
So one of the problems we have being a small company is REI, makes huge orders. They have a deal that they can change their mind at the last minute on like a given size or something like that. Initially, we had put in an order and they said they ordered a lot of double extra smalls and then they changed their mind. So we had, like 200 double extra smalls in one resort shirt. So eventually we did figure out that's what we did with them. We found a kids riding group and we were able to give them to them.
Yeah, but it works perfectly.
Yeah, so it does actually work.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to be ordering in double extra small.
Or the crop top.
Now I want to ask, as far as things that you like to cycle with, what's one piece of gear that you can't live without? And who is inspiring you right now?
My best friend in cycling is someone I've known for about 30 years who's ridden in Central Park since the late 60s. I have a few friends that are candidates for people that have done probably the most laps in Central Park, which is hard to know because people have been lapped in Central Park for 127 years, but I can think of a few that must really be up there. So one of them is a friend of mine. And I remember long before I thought of doing this professionally, he always just was so brilliant at mixing and matching different kits and things like that. And I still ride with him all the time. His name is Avalo York, and he is a big inspiration of me.
Awesome.
He won't listen to this, but
it's okay. His name's out there. You put it out.
He's barely on the internet. He doesn't have a cell phone. But yeah, no, he's a legend in New York. So riding with him is always an inspiration, and he still will surprise me with some of his kits.
What he shows up in.
Exactly. No, of course, I do make him wear my stuff a lot now. A lot of it at this point is my older friends that I ride with. We all used to race. I have friends here and in a similar group in LA where I grew up. When I go there, I do the same ride that I first did when I was 13 as a kid. Famous nickel drive.
That's so nostalgic.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I lived in New York for about a decade, and I was always terrified of the tourists because they're not looking where they're going. I got into a few accidents. So I don't know how you guys are riding in Central Park. I guess early morning.
Early morning is the time to go fast. That's when we sort of own the park. And if you go at 6, 5:30, 6, maybe to 7, 7:30, by 8, you probably can't really go that fast. Like if you go on Saturday or Sunday Easter or something, you can't yell at people and go fast. And everything is your fault. And as it should be. Even if somebody runs out in the middle of the street, why are you trying to do a workout in Central Park on a day like that? So my friends, we for years would go at lunch, which actually was a viable time a while ago, 20 to 30 years ago. Date myself too much.
Yeah, that's a thing. New York, it's definitely gotten even busier. There's just more people in general.
With the park, they're renting bikes. People have made a very successful business out of that. Didn't used to be. So you hear there are a lot of tourists in the park all over the place with their bikes by 9, 10 o'clock. So you can't really do training laps.
I remember riding up the west side up to George Washington. That, depending also on the time of the day, you can kind of get a good ride.
Well, for us, that's a way to get to our ride, which is great to be car free. Although, of course, now it's just filled with e-bikes, scooters, and just motorcycles.
It's like a common topic that keeps coming up in each of the podcast episodes is like we all mention e-bikes some way or another.
Yeah.
But you're seeing them everywhere. I mean, yeah, it's another mode of transportation too.
E-bikes are, they're okay, but the problem is that they're like a gateway vehicle because people see e-bikes and then all of a sudden they'll have sort of like lightweight, they'll have mopeds, and before you know it, there are motorcycles.
Now you're seeing everything. People are outfitting them and doing all sorts of different things to their bikes and changing things up. Didn't you do something with Greg LeMond for his e-bike line?
So before I started my company, that was one of the jobs I got. This is a whole other story. I started with a couple of friends in New York, a website about cycling.
Is this the New York City Velo?
Yes, that was it. So we started that in 2003, like before Facebook and stuff. And one of my partners had just said that Lance Armstrong is dirty, and the whole cycling industry. And this is like 2000. I mean, it was a small website in New York, so we got attention internationally more than like the Iowa local website or something. But on the other hand, we didn't depend on the cycling industry for our living or for advertising. We just did it for fun. So we started publishing articles by people that were saying, and this is, 5 years before Oprah, that he was dirty and that they had proof and that and the way he was manipulating people and stuff like that. And we got into it. It's a crazy story. There's an article about it that came out in the New York Times after all of this happened. So anyway, through that, I met a lot of people who became Lance Armstrong's adversaries, the Andreus and the LeMonds, first and foremost. And of course, he was a childhood hero of mine. I actually had met him briefly as a kid, and we just kind of hit it off. He helped me originally, actually, with I challenged myself. He came and did a ride for the charity, and we became friends. And then he wanted me to come work for him. I didn't want to move to Minneapolis. I ended up just working for him off-site and designing for him. And he was actually a big inspiration because I talked to him about doing our own brand. And he had always encouraged me to do something like that. So he's been very encouraging the whole time.
Well, he's always been on the cutting edge of Le Mans cycles from the start. It's funny, he's come up a lot, and I watched the more recent documentary that he did, The Last Ride, and that was amazing. You got to see more of a dynamic, and he does speak about that.
I had a lot of friends that didn't believe it, that said, but he's the most tested athlete, and how could he get, I mean, at first I wanted to believe it.
Winning the Tour de France so many times and fighting cancer. I don't know him personally, but I think in this day and age, it's about being honest and redeeming yourself because everybody is also going to have their opinion no matter what.
Absolutely.
We were talking about Greg LeMond, and that guy's just special. He's got one heck of a wife. It's just like a good business. If you have good people built around you and involved in your life, it's a recipe for success if you can make all of that work.
Absolutely.
And he's definitely done that. So
he's a different kind of guy for sure. He does. He is. A lot of people, I had the impression that he was bitter because he was so frustrated. It was so difficult for him during the Armstrong time. But actually, he's not like that at all. He's a lot of fun. He's very open. Everybody has stories. Like if you see him on the street, I've heard this story countless times, just cycling people that will see him if he happens to be in New York. and say, hey, Greg, catch him, maybe get a selfie or an autograph, and end up going into Starbucks with him and talking for 45 minutes. That's Greg. He's hosted, but I've been part of a bunch of events with him over the years. And Kathy always gives me the job of sort of being the Greg wrangler because she's so tired of it after a while, because 100 people pay to go, talk to Greg and get their picture taken. Yeah. The first 3 will spend an hour with them, and the rest of them will never see him. So you have to go up there and be like, okay, this is really great. Thanks. Get your picture. Sorry, the next people are coming up.
Right. If you're at the end and maybe you see 2 more people, you can stay after with them.
Or at the end, your best bet is to just stay and take them to the bar across the street and close it down and then up for it. We'll talk to you all night. And he's got amazing stories, actually. One of the things I really love to do is get some of his best stories and get them down to 2 or 3 minutes and then animate. That's my dream for Greg. Next time I see him.
He's just got a real personality. And one of the things you see coming across, and what I've got out of interviewing you today, is you just say what you want to say. There's no kind of putting a spin on your answers. You're just being very honest and open about your process. You don't have to put a pretty bow on everything, is what I'm trying to say, which in today's day, a lot of people are doing, more or less, is they want to just show you and produce this perfect picture of something, but we don't know what is behind any of it. There's no layer of truth anymore.
I need more media coaching or something, maybe. I just don't know what to do.
No, Alex.
It's authentic, and I think it's much more relatable.
It's 100% authentic. We need more of it when you can have some real conversations and get a real side of what somebody is like, deep dive into their creativity and what makes them a success. You can understand how and why it all happened. So I don't know if you want to share anything else personally.
If anyone's going to be listening at this point, go ahead.
Of course they are.
Okay. Shoot.
I don't know if it's something that you guys think about. How do you measure up between performance, comfort, and quality? Because I know some brands that I really like and wear, for example, super comfortable, but you have to compromise on the quality sometimes, right? Because if you want to put something more durable there, it means that maybe it's, I don't know if I have the right word, but harder fabric, if you will. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's to tell you the truth, to me, it's taken us a long time, I think, to get to where we really wanted to be. There's price, of course, is involved with that. I mean, industry-wide, it's interesting. La Passion, I don't know if you saw that. They just went out of business. This is to me, the interesting part about it, because they didn't, they did the Rafa thing. I thought they did a good job of it. Now, as an industry person, I know the products they were using, the fabrics, the pads, some of them were the same stuff we're using. It's funny because a lot of people, people will say on Reddit, this brand is this brand does that, this brand tile or doesn't wash well, or, and they're using the same fabric. It's just this perception. A lot of times they really are, especially the fancier brands. So La Passion, they couldn't say this, but they were really providing a lot of value. It's not a great message in a romantic business like this. Hey, this is really pretty much as good as those other brands, and it's 20, 30% less. That's really what they were selling to me. But nobody wants to hear that. You know what I mean? People,
they don't. They want to hear that this is something special. But a lot of people don't want to spend $600 on a kit now.
And I don't blame them.
I can't.
Like, as a middle-class kid, I think both my partner and I don't think it was even totally conscious. You know what I mean? We're not claiming like that we're from the streets or that we're aristocrats, right? It is kind of a middle-class brand. Our markups are probably a little bit less than most people. We don't spend as much on, we don't have a pro team. We're not sponsoring a Tour de France team or anything like that. So we use the same fabrics as some of those premium lines. We use elastic interface pads, as did La Passion, which I was surprised to see at some of the price points they were doing, because we have a woven bib with the highest end elastic interface pad. So woven as opposed to, I don't know if you want to put this, again, this could be in a way more interesting than a lot of the stuff we've just talked about.
Yeah, it is super interesting.
the construction of everything?
Okay, I can talk about
Yes.
that. So there are two kinds of fabrics in cycling bibs. There is knitted and woven. Knitted, and if you think about it, you probably could figure it out. Knitted is, if you can imagine one piece of yarn and knitting needles, that obviously it's all done by machine, but it's one piece of thread. So it's a cheaper way to do it. And it usually does the job well. The 99% of the clothes you have are knitted. If you think of a loom where you have multiple threads or pieces of yarn and you're putting those together, it's a little bit more complicated. You have to start with a bunch of different threads, but it gives you a bunch of advantages. Obviously, you can weave different fabrics together, and then it just is able to compress and expand more, as you can imagine, with separate pieces of thread across a modern mechanical loom. All the bibs that you get, say at about $300 and more, are made of woven fabric. It should trickle down, and that's one of the things that we have tried to be innovative about. Again, it's a hard thing to put forward in our advertising, in our literature, or maybe we're just doing a bad job of it. So we have $200 bibs that have the top end elastic interface pad, which I think is pretty much the best pad on the market and one of the most expensive for sure, and is made out of woven fabric, has a mesh upper, no cuffs, seamless, densely tested by the pros in Tuscany and so on. It's a difficult message for us, but something that we care very deeply about. And it's a little frustrating that we can't get that message out, because I think our bibs are really at a place that provide tremendous value. And the technology is amazing now. If you can really use some of these latest fabrics, and our factory has done a great job of. They've been in Italy making cycling goods for 50 years. They know it's a small community. They can introduce us to all the fabric makers and all the people that are involved that have helped us consult on constructing the bibs.
Yeah, I think you talked about the marketing, and I think you guys are doing a great job, but I think there's a lot of education on the consumer side. There's so many people that come to me like, what bib do I get? We talked about that in another episode that we're talking bike shop. What bike do I get? So it's the same thing with the bib. What bib do I get? So for you to explain that you're only going to enjoy a ride when you invest, doesn't have to be the most expensive, but you need to understand those type of techniques and make your choice and see what works for you. So I think it's important that there is some consumer education out there on those websites on any brand, not just what is the technology, but how does it work for you?
I think with bibs, for example, if they fit perfectly when you're standing up, that's not a good fit. Again, it's complicated, but when you're in a cycling crowd, you want it to fit then. So the straps are probably going to be a little bit tight when you're standing up. And it's a good point you make about, because I was thinking about this the other day. With bikes, they'll come out with 12 speed or disc brakes or any of these innovations, and then that's the way that the bike industry, they need to do that every few years, or it'll just die, right? But the innovations are obvious, right? We have electric shifting now. We didn't before. With the kits, it's a little more subtle. And because it is a fashion piece too, people are going to look at that first. But if I look just in our company that's been around for about 6, 7 years, the kits that we did 6 years ago are like laughable to me now, and how far it's progressed. And that wasn't that long ago. And I think people wore that 10 years ago. It's so heavy and thick. And, now our jerseys, we have different fabrics for the side panels, for the sleeves, for the pockets. Even a very high-end jersey 15 years ago, sometimes they did that, but not in the same way. They come out with all these incredible meshes now. Some of them have two-way stretch, some of them four-way stretch on the jersey. Sometimes, four-way stretch isn't great for a side panel or a pocket necessarily. You want a two-way stretch.
I'm going off topic here, but someone did a great video about that, about putting a wallet in there and showing the difference between where things move. And that's so important. You don't see that represented in a lot of websites or product details as well.
People tell us at the end of the day, though, unfortunately, it's an emotional purchase. People are going to see a picture of a jersey and they're like, that's me. I have to have that. I need that. See myself, next Sunday on my ride in that jersey. They don't want to know about 2A and 4A, which is cool.
It's me and your wildflower jersey. I'm eyeing that one. I need it.
We're both going crazy for them. We sent each other the same link. So what other influences, since we talked about a lot of artistic, obviously Basquiat and Haring, do you have other influences, musical? Is there stuff that really helps you create? I know for me, I love music and dancing. That helps me create.
I would say that's more of an inspiration usually than influence per se, but sure, movies and of course music. And
do you have a favorite right now? What are you listening to currently?
I'm listening to a lot of Samba music lately. I don't know that much about it, but
nice.
I love listening to it. And I love the mid-century jumbine type stuff too. And sometimes I force myself. It's hard because it is tedious and boring work, but I'll have nothing on and just try to do a few hours like that. And I know if I'm going well and it's not bothering me. Yeah. It is difficult to do though, that kind of deep work. I'd like to tell you I can do it all the time, but that's not.
I think we all would. That deep work, it does take mindset, focus. So that brings me to one of my last questions. What balances you? What do you like to do off the bike, and what kind of gives you an overall balance and helps
I have no balance.
No balance.
I do this and I ride my bike.
So you work well in chaos. As long as you ride your bike, you're good.
The other way around. My life's very boring. It's like all I do.
Oh, please. I want boring in my life. I have 2 little kids. I don't know what that sounds like or what that looks like anymore.
Yeah. I work and I ride my bike. I'm not complaining. I'm very lucky. I get to pretty much do what I want when I'm working and try to, as long as enough people buy it, I can have enough money to make the next one. That's kind of all you ask for in a business like this. But I do. I mean, for me, that's all I ever really wanted was the freedom to pursue my ideas.
It seems like you got it.
We could sit here picking your brain and talking to you forever. You're just easy to talk to. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. And the fact that you said yes to me, you were one of the first people I reached out to when we started the podcast, just expecting nothing. And you made my day. And to hear your story as well, it's been a privilege. I hope we can talk to you again very soon.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. It's great to meet you.
You too.
That's all for today's episode. We want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. Your support means everything to us. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends. Feel free to share your thoughts and feedback. We love hearing from you.